I've just bought this Porsche 911 Turbo. But not everything is as it seems. The 930 Turbo is the original top-of-the-range 911, featuring a 3-litre air-cooled flat-six engine known as the Widowmaker. It is instantly recognisable by its wide-body and whale-tail spoiler, often considered one of the most iconic and recognisable cars of all time. But this one, well, it's not quite what it says on the tin. Let me take you to the engine and show you what I mean. Underneath this iconic whale-tail deck lid is hiding a big secret. This isn't a Porsche. This is a fucking Beetle. This is a Covin 911, a perfect visual replica of a 930, but underneath it's a million miles away. See, back in the day, people had a lot more fun with cars. Regulations were more relaxed and body swaps were prolific. And there was one chassis that gave you endless options of customization: the Beetle. If you got a little bit bored of your Beetle styling, well, no problem. Companies like Coven offered body kits that you could just swap onto your existing chassis and turn it into something completely different. To look at least. What's interesting about the Coven is it's a perfect visual replica. They got an actual 930 and molded every single part. But unlike most kit cars, it wasn't just one massive slab of fiberglass. They did every single panel separately. So you can take the wings off, the bonnet off, the bumpers off, everything, and you're left with an exact 930 tub underneath. It's pretty crazy the lengths they went to. But before we dive in and I tell you all the plans we've got for this car and we start work on it today, let me give you a quick tour. So like I said, what is particularly cool about this car is it's not just one massive slab. Everything comes off, so we can customize it as you would be able to customize a normal Porsche. Body kits, wink wink, all of that sort of thing, everything comes off. But let me show you under the bonnet. Porsche quality. Here, I guess. Oh, no, put that there. Porsche ownership, can't beat it. So in the front, they have moved everything around and it is formatted like an original Porsche. We've got the fuel tank here. We've even got the filler cap here. We'll just leave that for now. And it's sort of as you'd expect. Got lots of rubber here. So fuel tank, various reservoirs, and also your battery would go here. But as you can see, this is where the wings mount on, as it would have in an original car. We've got some bolts underneath, some bolts here, and quite a few wood screws holding the front bumper on, because, you know, they're strong. Let me take you inside. Oh, hello, didn't see you there. Well, we are in the interior and it's actually pretty good. The headliner is a little bit disgraceful, but the dash is pretty damn nice actually. It looks really smart, resembles the original. We've got obviously genuine Porsche 911 seats front and back. The only places that it's particularly obvious this isn't a 911 is this tunnel and the pedals. Those are clearly Beetle, this is clearly Beetle, but it's quite impressive. They've even sort of done a mold in the back where it sort of molds the rear seat position, so you can't really tell this is a Beetle tub, other than if you take the carpet off. Obviously we don't have any carpet on, so we can see the pattern in the floor pan, but it's very impressive the lengths they have gone to. And back to the rear. Specifically, what we've got in the back here is just a single port Beetle engine, possibly the most lackluster thing you can have in the back end of a Porsche, or a sort of Porsche. But really, it's actually a brilliant engine. Yes, not from a performance point of view, but they're reliable, they go on forever. A really special piece of automotive engineering history, but just not really what you'd expect in the back end of one of these. But Porsche and Beetle do share a huge amount of history. Obviously, Ferdinand Porsche designed the original Beetle chassis that we have right here, but I'm sure he wasn't expecting two of his designs to come together in quite this way. Another really interesting thing about the Coven overall overall is it is an exact pull of the 930 Turbo. So original lights fit in, original parts all over the place. The glass is original Porsche glass, just about everything. Lots of the trim and door pillars, everything like that, that is all Porsche. So this does have a lot of Porsche parts on. It's just so far away from being a Porsche though. It's so bizarre, it's wicked. But let's go back around the front and let me tell you a little bit about what we're going to do with this thing, and then it's time to get cracking. So this certainly is a bizarre car, and we've had a lot of bizarre cars on this channel, but this one is definitely up there. But what is the plan? Well, this is never going to be a Porsche. And let me get that straight. I don't want to pretend that this is a Porsche, nothing like that, but I do think it's just a really cool bit of history that people did stuff like this from a couple of points of view. That guys went out and said, I'm going to make a Porsche replica body kit company, and then they just did it and started selling them. And on the other side of the coin, how people would flick through a magazine and find a massive piece of fiberglass, order it to their house, rip the body off their Beetle on their driveway, put this on and drive into the sunset. I just sort of love the DIY mentality about it all, and that era of how cars were modified. It's so crazy, and if you compare it to today, the world has changed so much, but I love this little snapshot back in time. But what is the plan for this build? Well, I know a lot of people might suggest get a Porsche engine, put it in the back, make it historically correct and look all glamorous, etc., etc. But first of all, I don't have the money to buy a Porsche engine. Second of all, it will never be a Porsche. What is interesting is really nice Covin replicas with Beetle engines in the back do sell for like 25,000 quid, which is unreal. But that's not the route I want to take. I want to turn this into something that is as much fun to live with as a classic 911. And I feel like we also have the creative license to do lots of things to this Covin that maybe people would find a little bit squeamish if it was done to a 930. Most notably, wide body kits, crazy body kits, the most crazy body kit you can get for a 930. If you know, you know. But outside of the extremities we're going to go to on styling with this build, from a mechanical point of view, this still could be a wonderful thing to drive around in. Now, I'm not really sure what I want to do engine-wise. The natural thing to do is put a Subaru engine in the back. Now, there are a lot of companies who offer full Subaru swap kits, and if you are one of them, please do reach out, because ultimately that is what I would like to do with this car. Make it look crazy and make it perform just as crazy. But that is a little bit down the line. The great thing about this platform is engines are very easy to remove and put back in. There's just a few bolts and you can drop it down, put a new one in. So we don't have to worry about that right now. But I'd really like to see if we can just get this thing running and driving in its current form. The story goes this hasn't ran in a long, long time, and you can tell. But it's a simple engine, and it'd be really nice if we could get this thing to run and drive it out the workshop and just see what this oddity is like to use. So let's check the fluids, chuck a battery on, and see what happens. But before we do that, we should probably check if this engine even turns freely. And thankfully it does. But that wasn't a given. This car has not been touched for many years. It's just gone from one person's driveway to the next. I've seen it pop up on the market lots of times, and the condition has always just slowly got worse and worse. But we had a good amount of oil, not the nicest looking oil, but enough to safely test this thing for a very limited amount of time. Don't worry, we will change all the fluids, but we just need to see if this thing is even capable of coming alive. But these are super simple engines, so it won't take us long to figure out if this is a dud or a runner. And now, with a glamorous battery and bonnet opening solution sorted, it's time for the moment of truth. When we turn the key, will this thing show us any life at all? Well, that's something, and that's a good place to start. That click is the starter motor. Now, if we were getting a repetitive click, that would indicate maybe we didn't have enough voltage from the battery going to the starter, but because it's sort of a single click, it indicates to me that the starter's not engaging properly at all. So, time to take the wheels off and get a closer look. Before we go any further, today's episode has been sponsored by Raycon. Now, if you're looking for a very snazzy present for yourself or for someone you know who likes to stay active, Raycon's bone conduction headphones are an excellent gift. They sit just on the outside of your ear so you can listen to your music, your podcasts, whatever, and still hear what's going on in the world around you, which makes you especially more sociable, and it's a lot safer. They're great for walks, workouts, or just getting outside during the day so you can keep moving. You get fantastic, clear sound without feeling closed off from your surroundings. It's a great gift idea, and well, you might want to grab yourself a pair as well, because right now you can get 15% off. Now this is pretty crazy. They use off-ear audio, sending sound through vibrations in your bones. Your ears stay open to the world around you while you still get crystal clear music, podcasts, or calls. And also on that note, they're perfect for staying in motion whilst remaining present and safe. I can keep my playlist going and still be aware of traffic, safety, and sound all in one. Another great feature is they're built for all-day use. 13 hours of battery life, IP68 waterproof and dustproof, perfect for sweat, rain, plus a no-bud fit that doesn't slip, ensuring maximum comfort whilst you move. I now use these, and I think you should too. As I said, whilst working on cars, you need something that's durable, still allows you to know what's going on around you for safety reasons. And with Mother's Day coming up in the US, the bone conduction headphones are the perfect gift for mums. So please do go click the link in the description or go to buyraycon.com/HudsonAutoFilmsBC to get 15% off now. A huge thank you to Raycon for sponsoring this episode and making all of today's activities possible. Now, this was my first time at seeing any of the underpinnings, and there was a lot of surface rust, but luckily nothing aggressive. It was just surface rust. Unlike the Nova, where there was holes everywhere, this wasn't horrendous, but this had certainly seen much better days. But we can deal with all of this stuff. We've had to deal with a lot worse. But just like the Nova, look at those spacers. Those are fat, with a P. But we now had a nice clear view of our rather crusty starter motor. Now, my first solution is to knock it. These do sometimes get seized and a little bit jammed and gunked up, so I gave it a healthy tap, maybe a little bit too healthy, and time to try again. No change. But it was a nice optimistic solution to think we could just smack it and the car would come to life. But what is next? Well, I'm looking around to see how it's wired up. The cabling looked a little bit suspicious, so I wanted to trace it back and see if everything was wired up correctly and if there was any breaks in any of the wiring. Now, the starter motor cable to the battery comes into the interior, and I sort of had to free it off and trace it all the way to the battery in the front. Now, this interior was now starting to show its true colours. It had been covered in all sorts of horrible sound deadening, which over time had become very sticky and disgusting. So I worked my way through, but then I got to the seat, so that had to come out, and then we could continue tracing it. And with the seat out, the treasure hunt could continue. And what I'd already noticed is there was lots of slightly dodgy earths on the floor pan. Now, these rust very easily, so there is no telling whether they're any good anymore. So that's something to note. But I managed to trace the battery cable all the way into the boot. Now, nothing looked particularly horrendous. It wasn't great, but there wasn't an obvious issue. So I cleaned everything up, cleaned up our earthing points and connectors all the way in the front and also on the back of the starter motor, and it was time to go again. Yay! Well, that's progress. The engine now turns over, so I'm going to put a little bit of petrol directly into the carb to see if it lights up. Nice. A cough, that's what we like. Put a bit more in. We had a cough, so time for a little bit more go juice. So we had some coughs, the engine is turning over, and when we dump fuel into the carb, it combusts, which is exactly what it should do. Which is good. This engine already has a lot more going for it than I thought. But what I'm messing with now, whilst the battery is unfortunately dying, is I'm just seeing what is going on with the choke. It's acting rather strange, so I'm just trying to see what's up. What's also up is that throttle cable. That is a little bit leery. Come on, old girl, you can do it. Well, that is alive enough for me. It's worth mentioning right now the fuel lines aren't connected, which is a good thing because we need to test this first without trying to drag old fuel through old fuel lines. But this thing wants to run. And whilst I left the battery to charge, the next thing I wanted to figure out is what was going on with the choke. It's positioned in the back of the car. As you can see, it's rather floppy, so that's not doing anything. We will need to hook that up properly, but right now the goal is just to get this thing running and driving in some form. So for now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to keep the choke open using a bit of string, and hopefully that will help this very cold engine, not to mention an engine that hasn't been properly ran for a very long time, come back to life. And with the choke held open and a little bit more fuel dumped down the carb, let's give this thing another go. And with a plume of smoke, this little engine is more alive than it's been in a very long time. Listen to that kitten meow. Damn. Now, the next thing I want to do is hook this up with a proper fuel line. Now, I'm a little bit unsure on how long this thing has been left. It's for many years, so certainly the fuel tank will be full of rubbish and so will the fuel lines. So what I'm going to do is just hook up a jerry can and try and run fuel directly to the carb. But then I quickly found out that we weren't pumping any fuel. Now obviously this has an old school mechanical fuel pump. This is a very short line, so it's not under really much stress, but no fuel was making it up even to the filter. So time to whip off that fuel pump and test it. It was working-ish, but just not very well at all. I even tried taking the line off to see if we got any drips coming out of it in any capacity from an even shorter line, and it wasn't doing it. So I think we can conclude this old mechanical fuel pump is toast. But there is a solution. A cheap Amazon electric fuel pump. But I then decided if I'm going to the effort of wiring this electric fuel pump in, I might as well get the fuel to actually come from the tank. Now obviously being a Beetle with an even weirder body on top, space is very limited, so I took the front wheels off to see exactly where the line was coming off the tank. It should be right at the very bottom, and I also could see the fuel line entering the engine bay at the rear, but I had no idea where it travelled from between the front and the rear. And after finding the tank outlet, I traced it. And well, I was a little bit surprised because it runs straight through the interior. Now, it seems obvious now seeing it there, but yeah, that's just going right underneath the passenger seat. And in my enthusiasm, I quickly cut the fuel line, forgetting that fuel lines usually hold fuel, and it managed to leak all over the floor pan. But luckily, petrol's not highly flammable or anything like that, right? But I continued on making a mess, and I got the electric fuel pump plugged in. Now this is just the easiest place for me to put it for now. It's not a final solution, but I just needed it to be very close to the tank and then easy to wire to the battery in the front. But now it was plumbed in a very elegant way with a little bit of tape just to make sure there's no leaks. So now it was time to wire it up, and all I did was just pass the cables through into the engine bay and then attach it directly to the battery. It's worth mentioning in the next episode on this, we're going to be tearing this apart. So we'll get proper fuel lines, a proper fuel pump setup on a triggered switch, but for now we just need to try and pump some fuel back into the carb. And with a quick tap of the terminals, we had a little bit of fuel squirt through. So it was working. Nice. So the next job was to connect that pipe, which basically comes out of the cabin just into the back of the engine bay to the carb. Now, as mentioned before, these fuel lines are old, the fuel tank has old fuel in it, all sorts. So obviously we're going to be running a couple of filters because we don't want all that gunk going into our carb. But again, this is just a temporary solution, and don't worry, it'll be fine. We were now ready to go,
And if you're wondering why the fuel line is particularly long, it's because I'm cheap and I don't want to cut it because I might need this long bit of fuel line in the future. But everything was now hooked up, so let's try this thing. That poor starter motor. Well, it's not running, so I thought maybe if I put a little bit of brake cleaner in, it might sort of prime things, suck things through, something like that. But still, nothing. So we'd gone from having something that was happy to combust to not wanting to combust at all. But then I had a thought. I loosened the distributor to get off the old mechanical fuel pump, and I thought maybe I hadn't bedded it in properly. And well, I was right. The shaft wasn't engaging and thus the rotor arm wasn't turning. A silly mistake, but time to fix it and try again. That's more like it. Now for the proper test. Fuel pump on. And one last final check for leaks. No combustion yet again. But then I saw no fuel was getting to the filter again. And well, this was another silly mistake. It's usually helpful to add a little bit of fuel to your car to allow it to start, especially when you removed the rest of the old fuel all over your floor pan. And just one last little helping hand to get the fuel in the right place and get any air out. I thought I'd give it the old suck.
Lovely. Oh, there goes the paint.
And with a few final checks done, we definitely had fuel, we definitely had spark. Now, it was time to try and light this thing up. Not blow it up, I mean like start the engine.
Ran for longer than I thought.
The beast was alive, at least somewhat, but it didn't run for quite as long as I expected, and I wasn't convinced fuel was doing exactly what it should be. It was getting to the carb, but I thought maybe the float was jammed. So I gave it a healthy tap with my only claw hammer, which is what is used in most of our restorations. A little bit more go juice, and a little prayer. The 911 was alive, and it was so powerful it even knocked my camera off the tripod. This was a huge moment, but I didn't let the excitement get to me. I wanted to check we weren't leaking fuel out of all of our rather dodgy connections. But luckily, everything was all good. So let's give this thing a little bit of beans. Crikey, listen to all 10 horsepower of that little Beetle engine. A monster.
She lives.
With a very big smile on my face and a very smoky workshop, the Covin 911 was alive again after many, many years. Mainly thanks to a claw hammer.
It should now start on the button, I hope.
Now she was back alive, it was time to get it up to temperature. And whilst it was warm, I also wanted to move the distributor around a little bit and just get timing a little bit better. This was all eyeballing or earballing, as they say, somewhere probably. but it was working, and this thing sounded smooth.
Nice. Good day's work.
And with everything set and the 911 now responding even just to the tiniest little flutter of the accelerator, we were ready for the next step, driving this thing. But I had to give it a little while, as the workshop was now full of smoke and you can't really breathe in there. So I came back the next day, tightened up the distributor and put the carb back together, and well, now it was time to get this thing back on its wheels and drive very cautiously into the sunset. Now, by nature, I'm quite optimistic, but getting this thing to run after many, many years of sitting and neglect is one thing, but getting it to drive and not overheat and go crazy and all sorts is another. But I put the wheels back on, and there's only really one way to find out. So, here goes nothing. The 911 had made it out of the barn. I was taking things slow and responsible to begin with. This thing sort of felt like it might combust at any moment, and not in a good way. But the more I drove it, the more I realised that was just in my head. I only have one working car now, and it's this. So inevitably I was just expecting something to go wrong. But it didn't.
Okay, so I don't know if you can hear me, but I'm on the maiden voyage, and it is very loud in here, and it sounds very like a Beetle, as you might expect, but it's driving. Do we have brakes? Kind of. That doesn't matter for now. We can deal with that. Sort of just quite aware of the potential of fires. But right now, we're okay. We seem to be fine. I can't believe it. This is our only working car right now. Fuck. The seat's not bolted in. This is our only working car on the channel, and it's a fake Porsche. This is cool. This is really cool. This is so fucking cool.
The car was well and truly up to temperature and performing well. But I didn't want to push my luck, so I thought I'll pull it into the shed and we'll call it a day. What a little beast.
We have a working car. Working car on the channel.
But after a few minutes I decided it was time to push my luck and test this with a little bit more oomph, because why not? The brakes were a limiting factor, but I did manage to get into third gear and hit 30 miles per hour, which was a little bit scary, but very cool. And honestly, it was doing great. Today couldn't have got much better. But then disaster struck.
The headlight fell out and smashed. Possibly the most expensive part on the car, cock. No. Fuck's sake. Of all the things that could break, all the non-genuine Porsche stuff, had to be the fucking Porsche. Oh well, what can you do? It works. Well, until moments ago, this was almost the perfect car, giving me no grief at all, really. But of course, something had to break, and really it was my fault. The headlights weren't secured in, well, they're sort of wrapped over a lip, but I got a bit cocky and overconfident and wanted to push that little Beetle engine maybe a little bit too hard, and well, I paid the price. So if any of you have a 930 headlight that you would like to donate or sell to the channel for a competitive price, please do let me know. They're like 200 quid. So most expensive part in the car I have already broken, which is typical. But other than that, what a little beast. It came to life without too much grief, and I'm really impressed. Driving it, I know I didn't give you too much of an inside view, but I was sort of quite conscious that the car could combust at any moment with the slightly dodgy fuel lines, and obviously didn't really know the measure of the car in general, so I was just a bit focused on driving. But it's like a little go-kart. It feels just like a Beetle, but a fraction of the weight. Obviously, the Beetle engine isn't necessarily the most thrilling thing in the world, but when you remove that much weight, it was a lot of fun. So it put a smile on my face in a way that a lot of cars don't. I can't quite put my finger on it, but it's really, really special. But the Covin has gone now from being abandoned for many years to alive again. It runs, it drives, and honestly, it's pretty damn good. The brakes need a little bit of attention. It does stop, but they're quite spongy, but that's easy stuff. But all in all, I'm just very impressed and excited to have a car that works. It's the small pleasures. But what is the plan? Well, it runs and drives, and I don't want to mess with that for now. Like I said at the beginning, I think engine swaps are something that this car really does deserve, but it'd be nice to keep it mobile and have something that is just fun to poodle around in for now. It doesn't restrain us from doing all the bodywork, crazy stuff, and turning this into a wild machine. We can do the engine at a later point. I'm also saying that because I'm deep in Nova engine territory at the moment, and the idea of taking on another complex engine swap does not sound very appealing. For me, and I hope you guys, we can scratch the engine itch with the Nova for now, and then by the time the Nova's wrapped up, then maybe we can pop something cooler in this. But moving forward, I think in the next episode on this, we are going to completely strip this down. As I mentioned, it breaks into its component parts, so we'll take the wings off and take the bumpers off, all that sort of thing, and see how it is underneath. We'll obviously completely strip the interior, get a better idea on the state of the floor. It's got all sorts of nasty stuff all over it, so we need to get rid of all of that. Treat the floor. Hopefully it doesn't need welding too much. I don't think it will. But give us a very solid base and start the sort of prep for making this nicer. Start the prep for putting a proper interior in later down the line. But before that, starting the prep for bodywork and wide bodying. As mentioned earlier, we are going to be doing a pretty crazy wide body on this thing. So yeah, in the next episode, focus on stripping it back, seeing what we're working with, cleaning up floors, cleaning up everything, and start really making a nice canvas to start test fitting our wide body. Then once we've done all of that excitement, then then it's bodywork, paint, wheels, then interior. That's actually a lot of work, but I just made it sound really quick. But because this is a different sort of build to the Nova, that we're not ripping it into a million pieces, it does mean we're going to make some pretty rapid progress on this thing. But having just brought up the Nova, I just want to reiterate, and I have done this lots of times, the Nova isn't going anywhere. It's still our primary project on this channel. I'm looking at it over there. It's just taking a long time to do this final thing. It's not easy, the work we've done, by no stretch, especially things like the fuel injection, but it's quite rapid and intensive. Like, you can see the progress. You know, when we got the car, we ripped it to pieces. That's a very visual thing, and it's not horrendously hard work. Then welding up all the chassis again, it's hard work, but it happens relatively quickly. So we've gone through the stage where loads has happened, and it's very easy to document and show you proper progress every single week. But this final sort of 20%, say, getting the engine properly dialed in with special custom intakes, wiring, bodywork, the wide body stuff we're doing, it's intense, and it's not something that you necessarily achieve a major milestone in a week. Like, it'd be awesome if that was the case, but I want to do it properly, and it's going to take a little bit longer. So the Nova is going to be here every single month, probably every other episode, and if I am able to make an episode back to back on the Nova, that is what will happen. But when the Nova isn't quite at the next milestone, you'll be seeing this crazy Coven, and I don't think that's such a bad thing. So rest assured, everything is going ahead as planned. We've just got another little fiberglass pig to deal with. So lots and lots of fun ahead. So if you enjoyed this episode, and even if you didn't, please do consider liking, sharing, subscribing, commenting, hitting the hype button, all of that sort of thing. It really does help me out, allows me to keep making episodes every week on these bizarre oddities, and I'm having a good time, and I hope you guys are too. Another great way to support the channel is my Patreon. I've linked it down below. Over on the Patreon, I have behind the scenes, early access, day-to-day updates on all of the cars. They saw this car ages ago and have lots of sort of behind the scenes progress on what's happening. So it's a great way to support the channel, and any money made just goes into the projects. And with that, another great way to support the channel is merchandise. I'm wearing some right now. It is linked down below. Again, any money made just goes into funding these projects, keeping the lights on in here, and having all sorts of fiberglass fun. But regardless, I'm just so grateful that you guys are here watching. So until next week, take care, and I will see you then. Test 1, 2, 3, test 1, 2.